Good morning and welcome aboard the world's largest ocean liner, the SS Norway. Our seagoing home for this coming week, your ticket for a tour of America's southeastern seaboard, a tour that goes from the shores of North Carolina to the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula. This morning we've dropped anchor just 3.1 miles outside the port of Wilmington, North Carolina, not far from where Sir Walter Raleigh landed the first English settlers in the New World almost 400 years ago. From our home on the seas, we welcome you aboard for a very special seagoing week starting today, Monday, May the 19th, 1986.
From NBC News, this is Today, live off the coast of Wilmington, North Carolina, with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Pauley.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a very special Monday morning for what promises to be a special week aboard the world's largest cruise vessel. This is the SS Norway, and we are standing on it about as high up as you can go up by the smokestacks. Below us lie 10 passenger decks on a ship that towers some 17 stories above the waterline. Our menu this week includes a variety of land and sea offerings. Our ports of call are going to include, starting tomorrow, Charleston, South Carolina, then Savannah, Georgia, then down to Florida. We'll sweep through Jacksonville and Miami. But first things first, today we're calling Wilmington, North Carolina home.
Nobody's going to believe we're on a ship if we don't do a little of this.
A little rocking.
A little.
Just a little bit.
And thank you, Willard. On Close Up this morning, the golden age of ocean travel. The Mauritania, the Queen Mary, the United States, the Titanic. All of them names that evoke another age, an age when the only way to cross the Atlantic was by ocean liner, when every trip was an adventure. Sadly, there are only two ships left that crossed the Atlantic anymore, but John Maxtone-Graham remembers the day when they did, when there were many, many more of them. He keeps the tradition alive with his book, The Only Way to Cross. And in point of fact, though, there were three ways to cross, weren't there?
That's quite right.
First class?
First, second, and steerage.
And steerage was not tourist class.
Steerage was the most profitable, but the largest class and the most uncomfortable.
Well, let's talk about the luxury. What was
Let's
first
go to the
class
top
like?
first, yes. First class was, in a way, I always describe it as there's nothing to do but not enough time to do it all. It was just a very pleasant way of spending a week between shores. Nobody could reach you. You ate well. You had a very high servant ratio, people to look after you very well, people who set out your clothes in the evening. Admirable food. Don't eat anything you couldn't lift was the motto on the North Atlantic. And just a very pleasant interlude, but you were still taking a ferry, so to speak. It was the only way to cross. You had to go by sea. And so everybody went in the same ship, whatever your class, and the first class was always the one they showed off to the public.
When you say the servant-passenger ratio in first class, how many servants might a first class
Well, on this ship,
passenger
for instance,
have?
when she was new, there were 1,200 servants for 1,800 passengers. Full, the ship carried 1,800, and there were 1,200 in crew, which is very high.
Now, in those days, one, I guess, dressed for dinner.
One dressed for dinner, as we do every night on mostly transatlantic crossings still.
Do Americans really know what that means, to dress
Yes,
for dinner?
most of them do, very easily. They all...
I mean, we wear clothes to dinner, but to dress...
To dress up, the men wear black tie. The women, you see, have to have a different dress every night, which makes it much more difficult to pack. But the men just have one black tie, and they're all right.
Well, there's one advantage, I guess, for going steerage, but that might be the only one. In the era we are maybe referring to, 30s and 40s, steerage, as I said before, if these weren't tourists, who were they?
These were people who were desperate to get to the New World, and the real height of the steerage program was early in the century, when they carried over 1 million a year westbound. And they crossed, I think, actually more comfortably than they had reached the ships. In other words, the journey from Russia to Hamburg to get onto the ship was much less comfortable once they got on board. You always see the photographers always take pictures of people looking very grim and unhappy. But in fact, I think the ships looked after them very well. And they were very worried about arriving in New York, where if they had disease or were in any way unfit, they were not able to land, so the companies would have to return them at their own expense.
What about going the opposite direction? Who was in steerage? If all
Eastbound,
the immigrant traffic was westbound?
It depended, Jane, on the economic conditions on either continent. When things were bad in America, the whole thing tipped backwards and people would go home. Sometimes they carried cattle eastbound in the same quarters they put the steerage passengers in.
Now, when was it all over?
It really ended in 1920, and that's when this great change occurred, which we still see today, because most of the passengers on ships all over the world now are American, and that started in 1920 when Congress said no more immigration. And so, to take their place, American tourists came into the ships.
And when at that did ocean liner travel peak?
Ocean liner travel peaked, I would say, just before World War I and after World War II. And then the jet destroyed it. But now the jet feeds all the cruise ships, so it's a funny thing. They're joined in unholy alliance, you see.
Yes, we're all out here.
All out here by air. When you finish from the ship, you'll go home by air.
All right. In a moment, we're going to talk about something else that's pertinent now for the cruise ship passenger. What is it about the Bermuda Triangle? Mystery or simply misunderstood? We'll be back in a moment. This is Today on board the SS Norway on NBC.
On Friday, we said goodbye to you from Studio 3B in New York, and now we're saying good morning from the SS Norway at sea. Let's show you how we got from there to here. We take you back to Saturday afternoon when we sailed out of the port of Miami, and there was a bit of fanfare, wasn't it?
Well, there was. It wasn't just for us, though. It was also Norwegian Constitution Day, so they had a marching band and Norwegian flags, in addition to American flags.
And there's our captain, Torben Hauge, taking us out. And we didn't know it at the time, but this ship can actually move sideways. He's got 5 engines up there, 10,000 horsepower each, that push us off to the side. As you can see, we had a regular flotilla accompanying us. We were treated, too, to a special skydiving exhibition as the troops floated in there.
Right, you were a little concerned that the little boats wouldn't see us coming.
Well, as the captain said, that's more their concern than it is ours, since we do happen to be the biggest thing out here on the waters. But it is nice. We're going to be continuing ahead with a special week. We've got another hour to go for a Monday morning. Stay with us. We'll be back after Station 3.